what the Batman/Superman DC universe timeline should look like. See what the block line say about this, and check this out.
The new DC slate revealed to us the upcoming Superman and Batman movies, among others, but those aren't relevant for this video, which revealed a good amount about what the future of this universe will look like in regards to these characters, but also brings up some questions. I've seen a lot of people ask about the timeline of this universe in regards to Superman and Batman, and certain people aren't really happy about what it looks like. Like, we know Superman Legacy will come out in 2025, and Gunn is looking for an actor younger than Henry Cavill. We also know that The Brave and the Bold is the first Batman movie in this universe, and it will be about Damian Wayne becoming Robin, which will lead into the Bat family going forward. Now, we don't know when that movie will be released. However, James Gunn did say in an interview that they will not be releasing like two Batman movies within 6 months of each other, which really just means that since Batman Part 2 will come out in October 2025, that means that The Brave and the Bold won't come out until mid-2026 at the earliest. But honestly, I think that means that they want to release it at that point, but are waiting a little bit more until there's a big enough gap between the two Batman movies, so let's assume it'll come out in like mid to late 2026. On top of all of that, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow will come out at some point, and that's a story about where Supergirl is 21 years old, and the story doesn't really work if she isn't. So yeah, it seems like Supergirl will be 21 years old when that movie comes out, which is hinted to be 2 years after Superman Legacy by James Gunn and Peter Safran in an interview. With all that knowledge under our belt, it does bring up a lot of questions about the timeline in regards to Superman and Batman and the relationships between their two timelines. Like, if Damian Wayne is already going to become Robin, that does suggest that Dick Grayson is Nightwing, Jason Todd is already Red Hood, and Tim Drake is, let's say, Red Robin. But if that's the case, and they're going for a young Superman, then, like, are Superman and Dick Grayson the same age? Is Batman going to be 20 years older than Superman again? Because that's not something I would like to see. I've seen all of these questions brought up quite a lot, so I decided to put together a reasonable timeline for both Batman and Superman and how they interact with each other that would basically make everyone happy and fit everything we already know, which isn't exactly what it seems. First of all, we have to keep in mind that in regards to Superman's age, James Gunn literally never said they're going for a young Superman who's just starting out. In fact, he did confirm that it's not going to be an origin story. What he said is that they're going for somebody who's younger than Henry Cavill, because Henry Cavill is a bit too old at this point. He's 39 years old, meaning by the end of this 10-year plan, he'll be in his early 50s, and that's not what they want. In my opinion, I think they're talking about a matter of a 10-year difference, because the difference between somebody who's 40 and by the end will be 50 is very big compared to somebody who's now 30 and by the end of this 10-year plan will be 40. So basically, I'm going to be assuming that in Superman Legacy, Clark Kent is 30 years old, and that's what the entire timeline is contingent on. When it comes to Batman, the New 52 did try to say that Bruce went through all 4 Robins in the matter of 6 years. That is fairly impossible, and it was never believable, but I don't mind the sentiment behind it. With the benefit of not having to develop it over time, you could just say that certain things happen, and certain characters were at a certain age when that thing happened, and then just cast the actors based off of how old they are now. 6 years is far too few, but I think 10 years does work. So, if Bruce Wayne started when he's 25, then now he's only 35, which is only 5 years older than Superman is. So this is what the timeline will look like. It's the year 1980 on Earth, but on Krypton it's whatever year they have, and Kara Zor-El is born in 1980. She'd be 15 years older than Kal-El. Obviously that does mean that she is in stasis for a while, and then by the time she comes out of stasis, Kal-El is already Clark Kent and Superman and an adult, but then she becomes Supergirl at the age of 15, which is how the whole timeline unfolds. But like her comic book counterpart, she is older than Superman and also older than Batman. Speaking of Batman, in the year 1991, Bruce Wayne is born, and a couple years later, in the year 1995, or at least whatever that is on Krypton, Kal-El is born. Then a couple months later, minutes before Krypton explodes, Jor-El sends Kal-El to Earth in a space pod, and his brother Zor-El sends his daughter Kara Zor-El, who's now 15 years old, alongside her dog Krypto, to Earth as well. Kara's pod gets sent, of course, and into the Phantom Zone, where it spends 26 years. While Kal-El's pod crashes in Smallville, Kansas, he's discovered by Jonathan and Martha Kent, who adopt him and tell nobody about his extraterrestrial origins. In the year 1999, Thomas and Martha Wayne are murdered in front of an 8-year-old Bruce Wayne, which is when he makes his vow. He isn't actually able to do anything with it because Alfred has all the control over him until he's around, let's say 12 years old. So in the year 2003, Bruce Wayne, who's 12 years old, leaves Gotham to begin training. There's going to be a couple of bursts in a row here, since within a 10-year period, the Robins do have to be pretty close in age. But I think it's to a point where it makes sense and it works. Like, in the year 2005, Barbara Gordon is born. In the year 2006, Dick Grayson is born. In the year 2007, Jason Todd is born. And then in the year 2010, Tim Drake is born. It's now 2014, Bruce Wayne is 23 years old and has been training for 11 years. At the last leg of his training, he joins the League of Assassins, or rather, probably the League of Shadows, since I don't think he would join something called the League of Assassins. During his training in the next year, now 2015, Bruce sleeps with Talia al Ghul and unknowingly impregnates her. Not too long after that, so that he doesn't notice that she's pregnant, he leaves the League of Assassins, or rather the League of Shadows, and heads to Gotham. Before he becomes Batman, Damian Wayne is born. Basically around the time that Bruce is trying to figure things out, he still hasn't become the Batman, and is still just a regular vigilante, and something is missing. That's when Damian Wayne is born. So that, now it's 2015, by the time the movie comes out and it's 2026, Damian Wayne is 11 years old. So Batman's 10-year timeline actually starts in 2016. After a few months of failing at his life mission, Bruce, who's now 25 years old, is just about ready to give up when he's reminded of a childhood experience with a bat that frightened him, and the rest is history. Batman is born. He's 25 years old. By 2026, when The Brave and the Bold is out, he's 35. He's been Batman for 10 years. However, Damian Wayne, like I said, was born before that, so it all comes together pretty well. This brings us to 2017, just 1 year after Bruce Wayne debuts as Batman, as that's the year that Clark Kent debuts as Superman. Clark Kent is 22 years old when he moves to Metropolis, joins the Daily Planet as a reporter, and debuts as Superman in the year 2017. Everything between his landing on Earth and becoming Superman is largely irrelevant for this video, which is why I didn't mention it, since we don't know if he's going to become Superboy as a teenager, if the Legion of Superheroes are involved in some way. We don't know any of that, so I didn't mention any of that because we don't have anything to go off of. What we do know is that he's probably been around for a couple years. I know it seems like Superman debuting at 22 years old is young, and it is, but I never really understood why he wouldn't debut in his early 20s. Like, he would graduate high school, do a couple things for a couple years, and then move to Metropolis and become Superman. It doesn't make sense to me that, he becomes Superman at 30 years old like he did in the DCU, although they kind of did make it make sense by having Jonathan Kent tell him to not do anything with his powers. But looking at any other continuity, and even the comics, what takes him so long to move to Metropolis and become Superman after graduating high school? Well, I think 4 years isn't actually that long. It makes sense for him to take those years to find the Fortress of Solitude, learn more about his powers and heritage, plus also study journalism before finally moving to Metropolis at the age of 22. It all makes sense. So, I think this works really well, as we will have a much younger actor in the role, and the character he's playing will be younger, around the same age that Henry Cavill was when he started out, but also he will be fairly experienced. In a world where Booster Gold and the Authority and Swamp Thing are all debuting, I would want Batman and Superman to have been around for a couple of years. So yeah, he has been around for a couple of years, but also he is fairly young, but also Bruce is only 5 years older, so it all comes together. It all works pretty well. So that brings us to the Robins, which is basically what the rest of the video is about. There is a bit of Superman in there, specifically with Supergirl, but most of it is about Robin and Robin and Robin and Robin. We start in 2018, Bruce is 27 years old, and he attends the circus on a date with someone, it doesn't really matter, where he witnesses the deaths of John and Mary Grayson, who leave behind a son, Dick Grayson, who is 12 years old. Then in 2019, after over a year of intense, grueling training, Dick Grayson is now 13 years old when he debuts as Robin for the first time. I think it's interesting looking at the Robins, how each one needs less training than the last to become Robin. Dick Grayson is just acrobatic. He had no fighting ability and no tactical ability. Nothing. Then there's Jason Todd, who has street fighting abilities. Then Tim Drake, who has a tactical mind, and he has martial arts classes. And then obviously Damian Wayne has been trained since birth to be an assassin, so each one needs less time than the last to train to become Robin. And Dick Grayson just needed more than the rest, which will work its way through the timeline and make the timeline make more sense, and not need for every single Robin to have like a year and a half of training like Dick Grayson does. But yes, at 13 years old, Dick Grayson debuts as Robin, and then the next year, in 2020, Barbara Gordon at the age of 15 becomes Batgirl. We don't actually know if Batgirl exists yet. Like, Damian Wayne being Robin indicates that Dick Grayson is Nightwing, but it doesn't really say anything about Barbara Gordon, but I think it should. I think that Barbara Gordon should become a vigilante around the same time that Dick becomes Robin. So there you go, Batgirl debuts in 2020. So Batman and Robin operate for 2 years before in 2021, at the age of 15, Dick Grayson leaves Gotham to form the Teen Titans alongside Kid Flash, Speedy, Aqualad, and Wonder Girl. All those sidekicks would be fairly new to the game, but their older counterparts have been around for a few years. This is a big if. We don't really know the Justice League situation yet, but just based on the fact that we are starting things off with Damian as Robin, I think it's fairly safe to assume that Dick Grayson is Nightwing and his entire Teen Titans generation are around as well, and also that the Justice League are around as well. This wasn't the case in the DC animated universe. We did start with Damian as Robin, but then like Jason didn't exist, Tim didn't exist, the Teen Titans kind of existed prior, but the Justice League didn't, but then also all the sidekicks didn't really exist at all. But that was a bit weird. I don't think James Good would want that. I think that he would probably want, if Dick Grayson is Nightwing, then the rest of his Teen Titans counterparts to be around the same age as well, and at that point in their superhero careers. But if that isn't the case, then I guess Dick Grayson leaves Gotham for other reasons, like he has a falling out with Bruce or something and he goes to Bloodhaven, and then maybe quits vigilantism for a couple years. Still in 2021, Jason Todd debuts. He's 14 years old and he steals the wheels off the Batmobile. Bruce Wayne is now 30, and he realizes that if he doesn't step in, this kid will be led down a path that he won't be able to come back from, but it's mostly influenced by his emotions of Dick leaving, something that he'd never admit. Bruce takes Jason in as his new ward. Dick was more acrobatic, but Jason was already experienced in fighting. So like I said, he needs much less training. By the end of the year, he doesn't need a full year. He has like maybe 8 months, and he debuts as Robin. Also in 2021, Kara Zor-El, who's still biologically 15 years old, as well as Krypto, escape the Phantom Zone and their pod heads for Earth after 26 years. Superman, who's now 26, intercepts it and meets his cousin and her dog for the first time. Superman learns many things about Krypton from Kara because she knows a lot more than he does. And Clark teaches Kara about Earth. She knows English because the pod taught it to her or something. It doesn't really matter. Kara is taken in by Jonathan and Martha Kent. I think that the name Kara Kent works, but also Kara Danvers is probably her most popular name, so maybe she could be taken in by Jeremiah Danvers and Eliza Danvers, like she is on the TV show. But that's not all that important. What is important is that not before long, Kara decides she wants to be like her cousin, and Supergirl debuts. The age here of her being 15 is just like to accommodate her being 21 by the year that Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow would come out in 2027, but also I just like the idea of her being around the same age as Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing, and the rest of those Teen Titans, and her debuting at 15 is around the year she usually debuts in the comics. Then in 2022, when Dick hears about the new Robin, he decides to leave the mantle behind, now at the age of 16, but struggles to find a new name. I think 16 is a bit young for him to become Nightwing, but 17 works. So let's say he'll become Nightwing in 2023. Before that though, still in 2022, the Joker kills Jason Todd. He wouldn't be Robin for very long, like maybe a year, and he's 15 years old. And I'd say also the Joker would paralyze Barbara, but I don't think that needs to happen. You don't need to paralyze her for her to become Oracle, and also she doesn't need to become Oracle at all. Jason Todd dying, however, needs to happen in a world where Damian Wayne is already Robin. In 2023, Dick Grayson is now 17 years old, and he finally creates his new mantle, that being Nightwing. Now, that does bring up a question of, like, where does he get the name Nightwing? And obviously it comes from Superman, which also brings up the question of the fact that I never really mentioned Batman and Superman teaming up in this timeline. This is because we don't have any idea when this would happen. It could happen at literally any point in the timeline. I guess it would have to happen before Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing, before obviously the Justice League comes together, but that could be at any point in the timeline. So let's just say that by now, Batman and Superman have teamed up in the past, the Justice League probably have formed, and also Batman and Superman are good enough friends that Dick Grayson is a good enough friend to Superman to have a conversation about Nightwing and the heroes from Krypton. But also I feel like that would have to happen after Kara comes to Earth, since that's the type of story that I feel like Kara would teach Clark, not the Fortress of Solitude or his holographic father. I think it would be something that Kara would tell him, so I think the whole timeline here works for when Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing, which would be years before Damian Wayne debuts as Robin, as he's 3 Robins later. Also in 2023, Jason is brought back to life by Ra's al Ghul and the Lazarus Pit. He wouldn't become Red Hood, or at the very least, the whole Under the Red Hood storyline wouldn't happen until 2025, since I think that him being Red Hood at 16 is a bit young. I'd rather wait till he's 18 to have that whole storyline play out. And also, it would be pretty raw. It would happen like right before the Brave and the Bold movie, like a year prior, and then we would see the Red Hood on some sort of like redemption arc in his first actual appearance, hopefully in a Red Hood movie or a Red Hood TV show. That's in the year 2025, which is actually the year that Superman Legacy will take place and come out. But before that, in the year 2024, Tim Drake debuts. Tim Drake, who's 14 years old, discovers Batman and Nightwing's identities and convinces a 33-year-old Batman to take him in as his sidekick. Tim forgoes the Robin identity and instead creates a new but very similar mantle in Red Robin. He's very intelligent and has a black belt in like multiple martial arts, so it takes him even less time to train. This brings us to 2025. Tim Drake is 15 years old and he debuts as Red Robin. The whole Under the Red Hood situation happens with a 34-year-old Batman and an 18-year-old Jason. And then also on, I guess, July 11th, 2025, Superman Legacy happens. We have no idea what will happen in that movie, nor do we have any idea how old Superman will be. But according to this timeline, Superman is 30 years old and he's already been Superman for 8 years. Then in 2026, The Brave and the Bold occurs. Talia al Ghul reveals to Bruce, who's 35 years old, that they have a son together named Damian, who's 11 years old, and then Bruce takes him in and he immediately takes over the mantle of Robin. Obviously, like I said, he's been trained since birth, so he doesn't need any formal training from Bruce in that regard, although he may need some training in other areas. That does bring up the question of what to do with Tim Drake, because the comics really don't have any idea what to do with him. I think they could either make him the Robin of the Teen Titans or maybe Young Justice movies, if that even happens, while Damian Wayne remains in the Batman movies. Or they could do his own thing. He could have his own TV show or his own movie called Red Robin. I don't know, but I think this is what the timeline could look like up until Damian Wayne becoming Robin in the year 2026 with The Brave and the Bold. Then in 2027, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow will occur, which is basically the same storyline from the comics. Like, I think the key elements will be kept. So we basically already know what will happen, which is that Kara will be 21 years old, and on her birthday, which is her 21st birthday, she travels to a faraway planet with a red sun in order to get drunk because she lives in America, and I guess also Krypton had similar laws to America where you can't drink alcohol until you're 21 years old. But Kara gets entangled in a girl's quest for revenge against the man who murdered her father, and when that same man steals her spaceship, Kara must accompany this girl to find this man on a quest across the cosmos. And that's the end of our timeline. That's what we know up until this point, with everything Superman, Batman, and I guess also Supergirl and Robin related. So that is it for this timeline. What the ages look like is something like this. Basically, I'm looking at it as of 2025, when Superman Legacy comes out. This is how old everyone will be. Bruce Wayne is 34, Clark Kent is 30. I've been saying this whole time that they have a 5-year gap, but no, it's actually a 4-year gap, because I was looking at how old Superman is in 2025 versus Batman in 2026. So yeah, a 4-year gap. Barbara Gordon is 20, Dick Grayson is 19, Kara Zor-El is also 19, but also technically 45. Jason Todd is 18, but also technically 18 and a half. He was dead for a couple months. Tim Drake is 15, and Damian Wayne is 10, and would become Robin the next year. So that is it for this timeline. I think that this could work with Damian Wayne becoming Robin in, let's say, 2026, Superman Legacy coming out in 2025, but him also being younger than Henry Cavill. I think this whole timeline works with the Bat Family and Superman and everything being close together. I think this would be perfect. Let me know if you disagree though. Let me know if you would change something. Let me know if I got something wrong. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like and smash that. Actually, don't do anything else. Just leave a like. Don't subscribe. Don't share this video. Only like it. Actually dislike it. I don't care. Bye.
Please subscribe, like this video, so watching. Have a great day. If you like this video, and see you guys. Bye.